And welcome to this episode of Trust or Bust, where we discuss the things that salespeople often do that really aren't so helpful, particularly because they break that all important element of a sale, which is trust. In this episode, we're going to look at presentation. So before we get going, let's just define exactly what that means. So, Moed, what do we mean by presentation?
So yeah, presentation can come in various forms, but essentially you are uh, presenting, sharing information, and this can come in the form of, an actual PowerPoint or keynote presentation that you're giving. This could be, proof of concept in terms of the demo of a product. But it comes in various forms. But essentially, you are sharing and showing information with the buyer.
Okay, so it could even be, so sometimes it all happens in one meeting where we kind of go from ask to tell. It could be that piece. Yeah.
It can, yes.
Um,
I mean, depending on the sales cycle and the types of
yeah.
products that you are selling, yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Separate meeting and demos, of course.
Yes.
Certain sectors like demos, and we know where those can go wrong. But well, no, all of them can go wrong for a couple of main reasons, really. And what do we say they are?
Yeah, and from my own research, there are two major ones that are the usual mistakes that salespeople make. So the first one is, and this is a recurring theme. We've talked about this in previous episodes where we cover trust or bust in different stages of the sales cycle, and that's where it's all about me, all about the seller. Right? It's not just what you say, but even the structure of the presentation is just so sales centric that it's not really about the buyer. So me, very self centered is the first one. The second one is overly complex, and we'll go into the science behind that later on. But presentations that are overly complex, you're trying to shove as much information as possible onto the buyer. More than 90% of it is pretty much useless and won't be remembered. So yeah, those are the two things that I see. Is
Brilliant.
that
Right,
what you see as well, Fred?
they are. They are. I mean, I just use a slightly different word. I go we.
Yeah,
And
there
I
we
talk
go.
about wee presentations. It's like it's kind of a little childish word. Oh, it's wee. Well, it's a childish way of presenting because it's very self-centered. It's very selfish. It's very kind of whatever.
Yeah,
So
agreed.
yeah, it's the same. It's the same idea. So why does that break trust then? So what's the bust element to that? Why doesn't it work?
Well, we talked about this in previous sessions. Um, I know this sounds narcissistic, but uh, people only care about themselves. It's as simple as, and it's more than just people only care about themselves. I was thinking about this the other day when I had a client ask me around this, and I said, well, here's the thing. You can only, you have a much more stronger relation with things that are about yourself as opposed to things that are about someone else. The game of the sales game is quite a hard game because not because it's overly complex and you're dealing with human emotions and it's not linear, all of which are true. It's that you're constantly having to think from the perspective of someone else. And that can be really draining. That can be very tiring because you've not just got to think about their perspective. You've got to literally step into their world. You've also got to become a different person in that respect. So people can only really relate to things that they can understand. And they're less likely going to understand things about you because you're asking them to take that really burdensome approach. They're more likely going to relate to things about their life and their circumstances. It's also very readily available to do so. So, that's why it breaks trust, because also you're not willing to step into their life. If you're not willing to step into their life, then how could you possibly present and negotiate and support and give them value that's going to be valuable for them, right? From their perspective as opposed to your own. So does that make sense? And
No,
maybe you have a different
no, it
view
does.
on this.
I mean, the blunt way, and I think both of us use this language pattern to shake people up. So people don't care. They don't care about you.
They just don't.
And people, oh, what do you mean? Well, there you go. Immediately, that's upset you, hasn't it? Because you care about you, and when you're being told that nobody does, see, it's yourself is most people's favorite subject, isn't it? So
Yeah.
Yeah, like you say, to step into their shoes, step into their life. Actually, I like that. I love that expression. Um, it shows you are willing to make the shift, and as you say, make it more relatable, make it more relevant to them. And it's tough. It's hard. It involves that thinking and being able to process it in a way that's unnatural to ourselves, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It is unnatural, right? Because I don't know that much about you. I mean, you and I know each other,
Yeah,
but there's decades of life experience that forms into how you make decisions.
yeah,
So I will trust you if you know me, right? And they say, I can't remember the term now, but the best way to understand someone is oh gosh, I can't remember the term. It'll come to me later on. But in Dale Carnegie's book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, the more I talk about myself, the more I think that you are more of an expert. Isn't that just really ironic, right? Isn't that really weird how that's the case?
yeah,
If you ask me enough questions that I wax lyrical about myself,
yeah,
people will think that the other person is a great listener and is more knowledgeable, even though you've barely said anything.
yeah. It's
That's
it's to
how
do.
much psychological egoism is played here, where we're talking about self-interest.
It's to be interesting, be interested, isn't it? It's the stuff we were saying in the
Agreed.
questioning section.
Agreed.
But we do have to give information. What we're saying here is, okay, so we get the question, we've done that, we've been interested, but we've got to have to share some stuff. So how can we do that? What are the musts, if you like, to be able to do that, but do it in an elegant way that's going to fit with how the brain works and to sort of have the impact that we want as a salesperson?
Yeah, and that's a very, very big question, right? Because it touches on quite a lot of areas. Let me give the best way I can describe it is by giving you an example and then working into that example. What were the things in there that absolutely built trust, and the science behind that? Back in 2006, enterprise VPN, so enterprise internet connectivity, right? It's not just about connecting to the internet, it's about connecting the business to each other, right?
Yeah,
You couldn't go onto the public internet. Back then, the public internet was just not as advanced and stable, and the infrastructure wasn't as wide as it is now. So you would have to go to these providers like BT, etc., to get some specialized, what they called Ethernet cables, right? Much more enterprise grade cables, connectivities, etc., that were more stable. They required higher, they provided higher bandwidth, etc. These are things that businesses required. Now we were selling that service, and we were in a competitive bid with other companies. I'm not going to name them, but the buyers had presentation after presentation, right? And we knew what those presentations were like. They were all about the supplier, all about them and their technology and how great it is, etc. So we had a gentleman by the name of Simon Cross, experienced man, came in, and he won this £150,000 contract off one slide, just one slide. The slide showed a map of the UK and it was a construction company. So there were temporary locations because of construction sites, but they also had fixed locations based on the offices, etc. So he showed the spots all over the UK where they had these sites, both temporary and permanent. And then he showed another image overlaying that, which was our network, perfectly in alignment with their locations. And he said, because we have those networks in place, you don't need to spend more money to build and create those networks, those connectivities. Also, we have reliable networks in there so that you're going to experience far less downtime, far less issues than anyone else that's going to come in and basically sell you on their technology, because they've got to implement, they've got to create those connectivities in place. We already have it in place. And then he put a third overlaying image, which is all the other sites where you're winning contracts right now. And guess what? We have the connectivities there already. That was it. They won the
wow.
contract just on that slide. So let's talk about that slide.
So before you
Yeah.
do that,
Yeah,
let me
please.
pull a couple of things out of what you've just done there.
Mm.
So you have told us a story there, and a story you've done deliberately because you want people to remember this example. We want people to remember so they can take stuff away and do it. And stories are hugely powerful, aren't they?
Yes.
it was a story about where this has actually happened.
Yes.
So it was a case study story, and you referenced a person, an individual. You called the guy's name out.
Yeah, I do this all
So
the time.
again,
Yeah.
we can. I know you said how important names are, even if it's someone else's name, so that
Yes.
we can think, okay, yeah, that's a real person. Um, and I can see you, and people maybe watching this on video can see what you're doing with your hands. But even if not, hopefully people are getting that visual picture of overlaying these networks, one on top of another, on top of another, that covered it. So even with just words, you made the thing very, very visual.
Mm.
And it was all about them, which I think that's the bit you're going to explain to us about this slide and how it built. So yeah, I just wanted to pull up those ones because again, practice what you preach there, which is good.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And here's the first thing. Number one, it doesn't have to be complicated. And we're going to get to that in the second point. Um, everything that Simon did was all about them. So the first thing we have to get clear on in this presentation is, what is the outcome? Actually, I'm going to add one extra word. What is their outcome, not your outcome? You will only achieve your outcome as a salesperson if, surprise, surprise, you achieve their outcome, right? You help them achieve theirs. So what is their outcome? So the buyer's outcome in that example were actually very simple. And buyers will do that, where they will talk about complex issues because they're ingrained to kind of talk about that complex issues. It's what they get paid for, right? If it's too simple, sometimes people feel, hang on, their salary will be called into question, their expertise will be called into question, and then sometimes do that. But quite honestly, it's very simple, right? Their CEO, their boss, whoever it is going to say, it's really simple, right? I want this network to be reliable. I want it to be up and running as fast as possible. And I want it to be flexible so that when we add new sites and take down old ones, it's not going to be a hassle. I mean, that was pretty much the only three things that every other requirement fed into at any one point, right? Doesn't matter what it was. I need it to be reliable. I need it to be flexible, right? And I need it to, what were the three? Sorry, I think I messed it up there.
Reliable, flexible, and no
Reliable
hassle.
and fast, and fast implementation. Sorry,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And that was what Simon thought about, right? Okay, what does reliable mean? Well, it's, the technology, fine, but everyone's technology was the same, actually. Back then, it was very rare to find a completely different technology because all of us had to kind of go through one supplier at any one point, which was usually BT. The core network can be different, but that's a technical thing we don't need to go down to. Yeah.
No, so interesting. So make it about them. But
Make it
I
about
mean,
them.
you've naturally started talking about this making stuff overcomplicated, and it's sort of maybe they start complicated, then it becomes like a faulty tower sketch. Well, you start it, I'm going to be complicated as well, and we kind of exacerbate this complication. We think we're all being terribly clever because things are so, and it's like actually this isn't helping anybody. This guy, Simon, he said he just kind of went, no, let's just strip this back. Let's make it super simple,
Yeah.
and that was actually what they loved when somebody had kind of had got I got the courage, if you like, to say, hang on, no, look, let's just, this is what it is, basically. That's what had the good effect, the positive
Exactly.
effect. Yeah.
And it was just all about them. I mean, he even started. Think about that. Even if someone said, "I want you to build a slide with the UK and talk about their network and our network," almost every single salesperson would have started with their network as the first image, and then put the customer on top. But he did it the other way around. He started with the customer or the buyer first. Leonardo da Vinci, arguably one of the smartest people to ever live, said, "Simplicity is the greatest form of sophistication."
Yeah.
And that's what you need to do as a salesperson. Bring it back to its simplest, bare bone minimum terms that you can describe it in, right? Okay, we need to be able to do this. What does that feed into? What does that mean? That means reliability. Great. We need it to do this. That means what? As quickly quick run up time as possible, quick to go to live as fast as possible, right? Okay. And we need this. Yes, because our business is constantly scaling as a construction company. We need to make sure that whoever we work with is able to just very easily plug those centers in so that we're online as fast as possible. Because like the more amount of time that we are offline, it means more cost to us as a business, and we're on slim margins as it is. Right. So we need to make sure that we keep those costs down and keep those delays down. As we know, in construction, delays are really things that you want to avoid. So it's all about them. It's very simple. And then he just created a story around one slide.
So then simplicity, but I say we do see people who overcomplicate things, thinking they're being clever, think it's going to make them look better, think it's going to drive more value. And so what's happening when you are overcomplicating stuff, apart from not making yourself look particularly clever? What other stuff is going on from the customer's point of view?
Well, if we look at it scientifically, there's a theory called cognitive load. Think about it as memory load, right? It's like the RAM in a computer. Memory load is basically the amount of information that you can hold for a short space of time for memory or for making decisions, right? So if you're going to make a decision about something, think about it as the RAM of the computer. There's only a certain amount of information that your brain can hold at that short space of time for the short term in order to then make a decision about something. And that decision could simply be, do I like this or not? The more complex you make it, the harder you make it for a person to be able to hold that information for that short space of time and therefore make a good decision. Because if you flood too much, the decision automatically becomes, I don't like it. So you're defeating yourself by putting too much information in there. Doesn't matter how good it is. Just the act of putting too much information will mean that someone won't like you and what you're presenting.
That's interesting, because I was thinking it's too much, I'll leave it for later. What you're saying is no, I don't like it. So I might leave it for later because I don't like it. I'm not going to look at it anyway.
Well, think about if you leave it for later. Say when you put something off because it's either boring or it's complex, etc. When do you really come back to that? How often do you come back to it? Versus putting it off for an even later date?
Yeah. You kid yourself you're going to do it, but it's just keeping going.
It's very rare that it happens unless it's something that's really important. But even then, if it's really important, you will probably deprioritize other things. So it's not, and I'm not saying that it's definitely going to be something that you will just leave forever and not come back to later on. But whether you come back to it later on or not, you've just taken the power away, right? You've just opened yourself up to a huge amount of risk now. At the very least, during a presentation, the person will switch off. The person will think about other things. Your greatest enemy isn't necessarily that someone won't understand what you're doing. It's maintaining that person's attention, right? And that's where working memory comes into it, right? It's maintaining that person's attention and focus on what you are showing. And that's the biggest problem there, because we're easily distracted now, especially on video calls. We are more prone to distractions now than we were in face-to-face meetings. In face-to-face meetings, your laptops will be closed most of the time. But in virtual presentations, very few people have that kind of rigor and discipline and hygiene to switch off notifications especially during a sales meeting. Yeah. Right. So you're more prone to those kinds of distractions.
We're using a tool designed to distract us.
Exactly.
to have the actual meeting itself,
Exactly. I still got all my windows and applications open. I'm not going to shut them down. So complexity leads to loss of attention. Loss of attention leads to less memory, less information. Less memory means I hold less information to therefore make an informed decision.
Right then, let's keep it simple. What stuff do we need to do to keep it simple? What things can we bring into presenting, apart from actually taking the time and effort to simplify something? Yeah, that's our job. Not go, let's make it really complex so then we look good. No, make it simple. Make it more simple. Make it look so simple that people think, well, why have we never worked that out ourselves? And don't be scared that is going to take value away from what you're doing. That's incredibly valuable, isn't it?
Agreed. Yeah. So let's make it as simple as possible. Number
So
one,
what else?
be crystal clear on the outcome, the buyer's outcome. Crystal clear, work in numbers of threes, right?
Yeah.
So numbers of threes, no more than that, really. Anything that's divisible by three. So if you choose three categories, have maximum three subcategories for each one, right? But no more than that. So
Why
outcomes, be
threes?
very clear.
What I
Yep.
know the brain likes threes. Why does the brain? I mean, I've always used threes. Just kind of,
I, you know,
must have learned it ages ago.
I'm still, yeah, I'm still looking at the research to convince myself of this. There seems to be this universal thing about the rule of three, and that if you hold just three things, I think based upon research and tests out there, the average number has been three. There are some people that might be able to hold five or maybe seven things, but the average number that people are able to hold at any one time seems to be three.
All right. And there's something in the language pattern as well, isn't there? Where there's a dum, 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 and that kind of thing, which people
Yeah,
people
there
like.
is that, and I think there's still still continuous research on there, but I think we can take it quite clear that from all the tests that were done with individuals as case studies, it seems that three is like the your best bet, right? Any
Okay.
more than that won't work. Under that, great, but I wouldn't go any further than that.
Okay. Keep it simple.
Keep it simple.
Buyer's outcomes, rules of three.
Rules of three, less words, more images on your presentation. Your brain can assimilate images 60,000 times faster than words, than the written word. It is more natural for us to think in terms of images, right? So more images, less words on slides. The other thing to keep it simple is if you have something on your slides, and this is where we're going down into the neuroscience element now, but if you have things on your slides, circle with hand, all right, or some sort of pen or whatever it is on the actual presentation, circle the thing you want to draw people's attention to. So when you're looking at each and every slide, think about and say, what is the 1 to 3 things that I want the viewer's eyes to instantly go towards or spend more time understanding on this slide? If there is one thing in there and it's like in a busy slide, circle that thing, highlight it. I don't care what you do something that attracts attention towards it.
Yeah. I mean, ideally, if you can draw a diagram live, that is incredibly powerful.
That's
I know
incredibly
not
powerful.
everyone can do that, and it's tricky. And if you haven't got the right kit to do it virtually, but everybody can circle stuff. In fact, even you just put an extra slide that has got the circle drawn on the slide, so when you change the slide, it's circled it. You know, you don't even have to do it by hand. It still has that effect. I talk to people about, you know, keep people's eyes moving, keep their eyes doing something. You know, looking for that to happen quite often. Okay.
Yes. To a certain extent, right? So I agree with you, but to a certain extent, because you don't want them to be. The brain takes precious glucose. We talked about this before, right? And glucose is still considered precious in terms of evolution of the brain and body. Maybe not now, but because we live in such abundance. But the less energy it's required to do an activity, the brain will go towards that. So don't keep the eyes moving too much, otherwise it becomes draining and you will wander off. But yeah, so keep it as simple as possible and straightforward as possible in that respect. Speak less. I know we're not doing that here, but that's because we're demonstrating and explaining. Yeah, exactly. but less words, less complexity. If you're talking to someone who is technical and therefore their minimum threshold of acceptance is complexity, that's something else.
Yeah.
But when you're talking to someone that isn't, use less words, less complexity, right? Be very clear about what you are saying. Enunciate your words a lot more, right? Because that clarity means less energy for me to have to focus to hear something, if that makes sense. And then the final one is be very clear on the agenda, right? The direction of the conversation. The agenda needs to be buyer driven. sorry, not buyer driven, but from the buyer's perspective, right? Of course, there's a sales element in there. You want to take them through everything, but just think about, instead of I want to take them through all these things so that they understand all these things, think about I know what the buyer wants to see and hear, and let's make sure they hear and see all those things. If that makes sense.
No, it does. And I heard somebody talking the other day. I wish I could remember who it was. It's a bit rude that I can't name drop, but who was talking about actually I do. It was Tim Ristra, who was talking about some of the research that they've done, where they're saying if you write your agenda well, so that it is clear on the purpose at the top of the agenda, it's got the 3 bullet points that you're going to be going through in the presentation. Don't try and do more. So they were talking about power of 3, and keep repeating that agenda. Keep putting it back
Yes.
into the slide deck so it keeps coming back up. Because what you're doing then is you're reminding them of the purpose. You're keeping them on track with where we're going. Yeah, it's helping them feel comfortable with the structure and the path you're taking. But this is why we're doing it. This is what you're getting out of it. These are the outcomes for you.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
it's slightly different. That was more of an online piece of advice. So it's slightly different to what you would do if you're in front of somebody, but dropping those in as some of your kind of those eye movements or those changes or those things to keep people, oh, something's happened there. So sprinkling those in every couple of slides was the advice on the basis of that, which made a lot of sense to me. Made a lot of sense.
That makes a lot of sense. Repetition is one of the channels to memory, right? So repetition is powerful. Yeah. Absolutely.
Good. Right, we better abide by our own advice. We've gone on slightly longer than I thought we would, but there is so much to
There's a
cover
lot
in
there.
presentation,
Yeah.
and there's just a couple of things which, if people can do this, that is really going to help them to build trust with their customers.
Agreed.